You good?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Well, yesterday we talked from a lot of different angles about this peculiar phenomena, and the real bottom line, the real basic gist of it is really just a reality check, just to settle into the basic fact of this is the way it is, and then check out exactly how that is and what it is and the way that that is for yourself, rather than taking it on hearsay or third hand or whatever, or out of pop culture or out of the news or out of a textbook or out of what your parents taught you, out of anything. It's like, look for yourself, because it may well be that you've been fed a pack of shall we say, inaccuracies as the hearsay version of what things are, of what's going on. And so it's really, in essence, the essence of all of this spiritual stuff and all of this is really just a reality check of get real. Here this is, here you are, check it out. What's going on, what's happening, what's really here, and how is it the way that it is, and what's up with all of that. It really couldn't be simpler. If it wasn't so, as we spoke in some depth about yesterday, if it wasn't so peculiar and slippery in the way that it is. But the peculiarness and slipperiness that it clearly embodies is objectively discoverable. It's here, it's obvious. So again, that's just more, just check it out. So, what could be simpler? So any aspect of anything we talked about yesterday, or any thoughts that have occurred to you as a reaction overnight, or anything seem interesting or provocative, feel free to bring it up and we can chat about it. Have some fun.
I'm curious about your experience as you're chatting with us about these things. I've had experiences when I'm trying to kind of talk about this in a, I don't know, probably a not so direct experience way, but when I chat about it with people that are interested, it almost feels like it draws it out of me. Like I end up feeling it more intensely when I'm trying to share it with somebody that's earnestly interested, and I'm not forcing it or anything. It's just like interesting. Is your experience similar to that? Does it pull it out when we're interested in it? Does it bring it to more?
I can't put two words together when I'm talking to someone who's not interested, so I don't bother. It's an interesting aspect, exactly what you're pointing out of sort of spontaneous, off-the-cuff conversation, that the sort of level of intelligent engagement of both parties in the exchange sort of seems to create the level of quality of the intelligence of the exchange.
Mm-hmm.
It's curious. Obviously, if you're sort of speaking boilerplate and you have prepared statements and all that, then that is, doesn't necessarily apply. But I mean, like in these kinds of talks, I have absolutely no idea what I'm going to say. I come in here and I just sit down and I'm, it's like, okay, the tape's rolling, now what? And something, and I say something, and I can kind of tell the level of people that I'm with by what I say. And so, of course, in present company, it's all very articulate and very
Yeah, right. Brilliant.
brilliant. Yeah. Through no fault of my own. But I noticed that exactly, very directly. It's pretty obvious. It's interesting.
And there's always the invitation to see for yourself. And I really get that in my situation, it's more like stop reaching out and pursuing so much and see it for yourself. And sometimes without other people to share it with, whether it's someone like yourself or just somebody that I know that isn't really like, quote, into this stuff, but interested in an exchange. The difference between that and just sitting with myself, sometimes it feels like I'm in a freaking desert. Like there's not as much juice there.
When you're with yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's easy to, the downside of, just being with yourself is you tend to go on your habitual tried and true internal pathways, so to speak. And it's difficult to be new and fresh when it's just you doing the same old you-ness that you do every day.
Escape.
Well, it's the nature of the beast. That's kind of the case. And so, that's the point of, ideally of events like this and all is that, they can be a little provocative and poking sticks into into one's normal take on things, just not necessarily better, but just different, and so it challenges and makes one sort of step back and go, just get a little fresh take on things, ideally. It's all about seeing for yourself. It's useless. The point is not to adopt some philosophy that you're aspiring to and you put it up on your wall as your platform and the 10 things you're shooting for. That's just, who cares? The point is this stuff is only powerful to the extent you're living it. And not as a pretense or as a, play acting, to the extent you feel it. Because it's the feeling, like I was talking about yesterday, it's the implication of what you're seeing it as that you feel. That's the take home of how you feel about this, about being here. What does it feel like to be here? Does it feel like a constraint? Does it feel like a problem? Does it feel like a weight? Or does it feel like a delightful, luminous openness of possibility? So check out how you feel, and then you can you'll be looking at the implication of your own basically unconscious orientations to what you're holding this to be.
And not like what you said, is it delightful or is it heavy? And what sounds to me like a value judgment in there, but
well, it's not a value so much as it's a symptom.
Okay.
Because in actuality is not vague and nebulous. It's very precise and very specific. Objectivity exists, and it's exactly the way that it is. It's not just some vague, wishy-washy, nebulous thing. But exactly the way it is happens to be absolutely indeterminate, which is interesting. So when you perceive and have the self-verifying experience of this indeterminacy, it equals an openness of possibility. It equals an openness of unstuckness, let's call it. Sort of the opposite of a rat in a maze. A lack of constraint. And so this is not just, that feels better, so try to create that. It's it happens to be that way, which happens to feel pretty cool. The implication of that happens to feel pretty cool, especially by contrast of other implications of constraint and being stuck and being, having insoluble problems and things like that. And it's ultimately more powerful because it's objective. It's based on actuality as opposed to based on some notion one has. Because the problem with most, consensus reality orientations is that they're basically fantasies, and we know they're fantasies. Even if you're buying into it, you kind of know it's not true, and so so that induces a whole nother layer of anxiety, of vulnerability and defensiveness. I need to defend this. Reality doesn't need to be defended because it is the way it is. It's not some point of view that you have to, that's vulnerable. It's absolutely invulnerable because it's objectively true. It can't be challenged. You can say it's not that way. It's like, okay, say it's not that way. It doesn't make it not that way, and so one settles into a bedrock of actuality that is also invulnerable. It's completely bulletproof. It's Teflon. You can't. Nothing sticks to it. Nothing can challenge it. It's laughable. And so, which is another aspect of orienting more to the way that this is you have the weight of truth, of actuality behind you, as opposed to just some claim, some philosophy or view that you basically have to bolster up with faith and bravado and bullying and all to try and defend a certainty, a certain knowledge of vulnerability.
Like the Big Bang Theory.
Yeah, well, like anything.
Well, and I'm wondering, so how does that, this noticing or the actuality of the world or reality or whatever is, there's this thing that I guess people would term a consensus reality. But you talk to somebody, you take a political situation, then
For example,
you can look at it. And some people they're like, how could you not see this? And the other one is, how can you not see that?
Right.
And it's like two totally different realities about the same object, if you will. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Yeah.
How does it work for consensus reality?
Well, it's a myth. Consensus reality is a claim for something that is not that. Everyone lives in their own reality. Everyone thinks what they think and they feel what they feel, and no one agrees with anyone else. If you get down to the fine print.
I'm right here, Will.
This
Well, of
reality.
course. Sorry?
Can you say that this reality is truth?
Which reality?
This reality, and I'm thinking externally. You're thinking, looking at the world, if you will.
Yes, there is an objective condition that is the way it is, that is independent of what you think it is. And yet, in the context of that actuality, it's still possible to think things are however you happen to think they are, but that
That's
doesn't
more
make
of a-
it so.
That's like an overlay.
Yeah, of course. There is, of course there is objective fact. There is an actuality that is the way it is. And that's the powerful point. So oriented to that, again, has the benefit of not needing to be defended, not needing to be argued. It is the way it is, whatever you think about it or whatever you say about it or don't say about it, as opposed to a philosophy or a point of view, which totally depends upon argument.
Would you say, I'm thinking of a Nisargadatta thing that I read about the world and the body and the I am all arise as unison, or
Sure.
all it's all or nothing.
Yeah, sure,
You know, in other words, that triad
sure.
is blooms or not. And, you know, in other words, there's not one without the other.
Well, sure. I mean, basically, a simple way of putting that descriptively is any one idea implies every other idea with relationship to it. You know, an example of this experientially, very simply, is you wake up in the morning, say you're in really deep sleep and you're just out of it. You know, there's no body, there's no world, there's no nothing. It's just, right? So you wake up and you start to come out of it, and all of a sudden, oh, you know, you're here, here's your room, there's the world, here's your body, you know, you start moving around, you cough, whatever. And oh, you know, gosh, and you know, what do I have to do today? You know, or, and you remember yesterday, oh, I had a fight with so and so, and they're going to be pissed at me, or, you know, whatever. So again, those orientational frameworks appear in your experience basically as a matrix. You know, relative, they all support each other as a relative orientation of various facts. You know, facts that are held to be, you know, the case more or less, as a whole, sort of an edifice or structure. You know, I call it basically an interpretive framework. And the interpretive framework is based on and appears within actuality, which is not an interpretive framework. And yet actuality supports any interpretive framework, because actuality is like the ultimate Rorschach blot. You can look at it, I mean, here you have, you know, a staunch conservative and a staunch liberal.
Yeah.
You know, just, how can you think that? It's like, you're wrong. It's just like, it's not like that. And then the other one says, no, how can you think that? You're wrong. It's just not like that. So actuality is vague enough, apparently, that it can support these two relatively internally coherent worldviews, even though they have nothing to do with each other whatsoever. You know, they have no, you know, let's say no meeting point at all. So actuality has an intrinsic vagueness, an intrinsic, you know, an intrinsic possibility of being interpreted one way or another way, ambiguity, that gives rise to or is fertile ground for any particular interpretation that you settle on, or that you find yourself entertaining, let's say.
Do you think that we're gaining insight to that whole idea of the subjects imbuing reality with certain quality by, you know, recent quantum physics theories?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that all just supports and gives greater evidence to all of these aspects. You know, it reveals the objective basis for them, because it turns out that there is no specific objective event. The objective event, I mean, according to current theory, the objective event depends upon the point of view from which it's being observed. And the same event observed from another perspective would be a completely different actuality. You know, maybe subtly so, but still different. You know, the room you're seeing and the room I'm seeing are not the same room. You know, which is trite in one sense, but it's also very profound in another sense. But more than that, you know, more than that, cutting edge science shows that there is that ambiguity ambiguity is hardwired into the actual basis of things, as opposed to being an error of observation. So it's not like things are a certain way and you're looking at them fuzzily. It's like things are fuzzy. At the fundamental level, they're fuzzy. And so no wonder they look fuzzy. But this fuzziness is an excellent growth medium, so to speak, for any particular interpretation, because you can see it as this or you can see it as that, and it can be and it can look convincingly like the one and the other. You know, and that's how we have these interpretive frameworks. So it's not that the interpretive frameworks are wrong, it's just that they're partial takes on something that is more than that. So, for example, when you're asleep, there's no world, there's no, say you're in deep sleep, there's no world, there's no body, there's no I. You wake up, all of a sudden there may be a world, a body, and an I. The world, the body, and the I aren't true, and no world and no body and no I is not true. They're both just different interpretive frameworks, let's say, of something else that is not limited to being either of those exclusively.
I have this deep curiosity about what it is right before you wake up. That you somehow there's this lingering feeling tone of what it was before you started to realize, oh, there's sound, oh, there's light in this room, oh, there's me, I'm in this position. There's some lingering feeling tone of what it was a few moments before when there was just.
Good, yeah, and that's an excellent experiment, it's an excellent investigation, just to push the envelope of one's habitual certainty that one's waking frame of reference is just objectively true. Well, of course it's true. Of course it's obvious. Things are the way I think they are.
So, that, for lack of a better word, which is inadequate, I would say, state before becoming awakened in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
Is not really the I am, I would say, because I am, I kind of, that idea, I think it's interesting, this I am, the world and the body, they all rise at the same time. So it's not really an I am, it's just this something.
Right.
And that's what I'm trying to nail down. That's probably not nail downable.
Right, well, that's the point. Nailing it down is basically erecting an interpretive framework.
Right.
And the very nature of what that is it's not an interpretive framework.
And it seems like where we're going is basically saying, pay attention to that in a way, or allow for that. In other words, that is there. Just allowing that it is who you are, in a sense. Although who you are might be the bottom line of who all of us are, in unison. I don't know how to describe it.
Well, the point is to inclusively orient to the full range of everything that is present. And normal waking state interpretive framework orientation is very partialized. For example, one's interpretive framework, basically, let's say an interpretive framework is anything you could say or put into words about things. So I'm here, I'm sitting in this chair, we're here at this talk, we're in this room, we're in Doylestown, we're this. So all of that is an interpretive framework. And it's a partialization of the actuality, the experiential actuality. We're not talking vague philosophical abstractions here. We're talking absolutely concrete. So the actuality is all, let's say, experiential energy or experiential characteristics that are present within the experiential field right now, which includes every, the nuance of every shade of paint on every wall, every speck of dust, the exact wrinkle and configuration of every fold of cloth and on every, everything. It's all here, it's all actual, and it's generally glossed over and simplified down and generalized in an interpretive framework. And the point is it's not that that's better than interpretive frameworks, because interpretive frameworks are actual too. They happen in experience, but interpretive frameworks are, let's say, one category of quality of event that can occur in experience, and it occurs within a context of the full frequency, let's say the full bandwidth of the experiential presence, which is also always here. So it's sort of like different, like we were talking about yesterday, you weren't here, but it's almost like different strata that coexist, or different bands of a spectrum, you could say. And the point is to become aware of the whole schmear and not orient to partialities and think that they're the totality.
Does this become, do you end up becoming less of a person that argues with people? When you really,
I don't, maybe yes, maybe no. It depends on your temperament, which is not a
I
contrivance.
mean, if you're opening up to all possibilities more, it would seem to me that you're gonna sort of stand back and say, you know, for a lot of things that happen.
Well, opening to possibilities is not really the way I'd put it. It's not like all points of view are valid. It's like no point of view is valid. You know, it becomes a lot like, from my perspective, it becomes a lot like watching children talk to each other on the playground in the kindergarten. You know, they say things to each other, you know, that are just, you know, laughable partialities and trivial, you know, it's like, oh, aren't they cute? And, you know, basically the things that adults say to each other are very, very similar to that in the sense of being, you know, being laughable.
Quaint.
Yeah, quaint little partialities that really are, you know, like absurd. It's laughable to suppose that things are actually like that.
Well, I had that thought this morning. I started to watch my mind go into its normal routine. And then I thought, well, no, I don't want to do that. But then the word framework hit me, and I thought, I need to live without frameworks. And immediately it felt like there was an earthquake and the ground opened up under my feet. It's like no foundation. What's left without a framework?
Yeah.
And I guess the question is, how possible is it to live without a framework?
But again, you see, it's not a dichotomy. It's not frameworks and no frameworks is not mutually exclusive. They coexist. You're always living without a framework because you're always having genuine experience, which is not an interpretive framework. So that's always the case. And there may also be interpretive framework or frameworks present. They can coexist, and they actually don't have a whole lot to do with each other, but that's not an issue. You know, the trick is not to partialize. Just when there's an interpretive framework present, notice that it is a subsystem of your experiential field, rather than the whole thing. So in other words, don't get tunnel vision where you zoom in on the interpretive framework, which is the normal human mode. I mean, what most people do is they zoom in on their interpretive framework and see the entire world as being their interpretive framework, without noticing that the interpretive framework is a mental event, basically, that is a partialization. It's a partial event within the vast field of their experiential present, most of which is not a mental event.
One way to look at it is, you know, you look at all these books, and any one book is a mental interpretive framework, but there's the whole library, so to speak.
Sure.
They're all interpretations.
Right. And they can sit next to each other on the shelves, no problem.
They're all fiction, and even if they say they're not.
Yeah. Yes. Interpretive frameworks are all fiction.
That's right.
Interpretive frameworks are all fiction. They're not necessarily wrong, they're just oversimplification. It's like interpretive frameworks are a lot like the caption on a picture. You know, you'll have a picture, you can take a picture of, you know, an overview of Washington, D.C., and in the bottom it might say, you know, the Capitol buildings. But there's a whole lot more present in the picture than the Capitol buildings. So it's a fiction that this is the Capitol buildings. It's not untrue because the Capitol buildings are in there somewhere. But it's very biased, it's very partialized, it's very censored. And basically that's censorship or denial is the mechanism that interpretive frameworks use to maintain their coherence. You have this vast field of experience and you very selectively choose little bits that you want to emphasize, and those become the elements that you talk about and think about, and those become what you're saying is happening, is true. But the censorship and denial does not eliminate the things that it excludes. They're still here too. So, when you talk about what's happening here, you may not include the dust on the floor, but that doesn't make the dust on the floor go away. You're just not attending to it. We were having a spiritual talk and it was very elevated and stimulating. Does the dust think so? Oh, I mean, that was silly, but anyway.
Let's say noticing is a gateway drug.
Yeah.
And
Just give me one.
and so, well, the thrill of noticing, if as it starts to gain a little momentum, could include a release from presumption, a release from interpretive frameworks and the congestion that those engender, to a brighter, more curious view. And still the movement of consciousness, finding deliciousness in perception, can be a drag. In other words, I don't care how fantastic this can be, whether it's dust on the floor or a view of speechless fractality that defies human language. It's like, so the fuck what? There's a part of me, maybe it's just a bias in my own template, which is like, just leave me the fuck alone. In enlightenment, who cares? Suffering, who cares? Everything is like, who cares? Even to be lit to the point of doing noticing or making progress or finding delicious experience is like too much. I'm just not interested.
Well, that's cool. No one has a gun to your head.
Good. Do you find
the bar is, you go out and hang a left and 4 miles out of the way, the bar's open.
really?
It's all good.
There's a good.
There's a sport, they'll have a football game on the TV. They'll be happy as shit.
Lots of better gateway drugs than noticing.
I'm glad to know.
No, this is an opportunity for those that feel motivated. And it's my observation that there's an innate, let's say, an innate vector in consciousness itself that, an innate curiosity about itself that tends towards investigating itself.
Well,
and that all human functioning and behavior ultimately is that, albeit usually in very, very inefficient modes.
Right.
So noticing is just getting a little more efficient at enabling that vector, at enacting that vector.
Well, I'm speaking in the context of being friendly toward that vector.
Sure.
Yeah. It's like discovery itself, meaning, engaged consciousness, engaged experience, being on either the cooperative, participative, or receptive end of experiencing is like, that's fine, but it's like an interest in this, realization as an event, realization as a delight, realization as freedom from self. Even that starts to lose its, attractiveness. I'm not saying I'm, done with still a profound, let's say, curiosity, but everything appears as, an object or a scintillation in experience. And do you find, can we just say, objectless awareness, unperturbable awareness? Or is there always, just an ongoing soup of things tickling your attention?
They're one and the same. It's both.
Yeah.
Those are the two. You could say the two modes of the same thing.
Uh-huh.
There's no mutual exclusion there.
Yeah.
I could put it technically. The presence is always radiant, and the radiance is always present.
Yeah.
and I agree with you, with basically the ultimate absurdity and hollowness of orienting towards a realization, which is just basically a fantasy. Realization is, it can be observed as an arguable, qualifiable event if and when it becomes relevant to observe that as an arguable, qualifiable event.
Yeah.
But it's meaningless unless it becomes meaningful, and it's only meaningful if it can be observed to have occurred in any terms you want to put it.
Yeah.
The point is not to orient to achieve something. The point is to acknowledge what is already. You're not gaining anything. You're not changing anything. You're just like wake up and smell the coffee, or don't wake up and smell the coffee. But not waking up and smell the coffee, what is that? Waking up and smelling the coffee,
Yeah.
What is that? Fuck realization, fuck spirituality. I'm going to go pick a fight in the bar.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah.
It's not a matter of this versus that.
Mhm.
It's like, well, cool, anything, but what is that? And not like as, oh, I'm going to, study this and become a philosopher. It's like, no, just what is it?
Yeah.
Check it out. But check it out full body, check it out full experiential field, and, open your eyes, you might say.
Yeah.
Or notice that your eyes have never been closed, more simply. And then all of this preciousness and qualification and path and realization, is really just, stories for children.
Right. Yeah, so there's no, so there's no strong sentiment or preference in whatever is appearing in you as you, that we could refer to as reality. Right? A pure innocence, pure receptivity.
Yeah, pure innocence, pure receptivity, which can look like anything. It can look like absolute corruption and perversion. It's not.
I guess so.
It's not pure and innocent as opposed to some impurity and some lack of innocence.
Yeah.
It's pure and innocent as in anything goes, bring it on.
Yeah.
In Dzogchen they say that there's a primal purity,
Mm-hmm.
which this intrinsically is, which you could say is a pure innocence, pure purity, that cannot be violated.
Yes.
It's not like it's an innocence as opposed to something else. It's an innocence that allows anything.
Yeah.
And still remains innocent.
Yeah.
Very much like the mirror can reflect anything, and the mirror itself is not tainted or damaged.
Yeah.
It's still this pure mirror that's sitting there just.
Yeah, it's not a behavioral innocence.
No.
It's the nature of primacy itself,
Yes.
in which everything is,
Yeah.
got
And-
permission.
And all of the everything that is occurring is of the nature of that primacy, because it's not like the primacy is over here and the everything's over here.
Yeah.
It's, again, there's an intimacy, an inherent intimacy in the structure, in the structural way, the mechanism
Yeah.
of experience, where, again, you can look at a dream and you can see it very clearly, maybe. There's the dreaming and there's the dream, and the dreaming's not over here and the dream's not over there. The dream is the dreaming, and there's nothing more than the dreaming. And, you might analogize that the dreaming is like the mirror. It's a non-event. It's just the presence that allows the possibility of the dream. And the dream is some kind of elaborate, apparent acting out of apparent eventfulness.
Yes.
But that eventfulness is the mirror and never becomes more than the mirror. And there's no way you can deconstruct that or make a mechanism of that the way that works.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it is experienceable that is the way that is so, and that it happens to be more or less precisely like that. So the ground state, the state of absolute objectivity, which is absolutely pure and absolutely inviolable. In other words, it never becomes anything other than itself. It never gains, it never loses, it never gets improved, it never gets damaged.
Yeah.
It's just the pure zero state, let's say. Anything and everything can appear within it and never doesn't become more than that zero state. So all of this and this conversation and the dust on the floor and whatever is that zero state without needing to be reduced to or maintain that zero state, because all the elaboration is that. So it's all a zero-sum game. So who gives a shit?
That's
so
sweet.
Go to the sports bar.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and that is the primal purity. That is the
Sure.
innocence, without needing to be innocent or needing to be pure.
Yeah. So discernment and preference and every other thing, of course, is going to appear, but it's you're not going to necessarily steer. Meaning that, you know, this is good, that's not good, this is better, this is higher, this is lower.
Yeah, I mean, you're free to do all that stuff, but
Sure.
it's a pretense.
Yeah.
Because you actually aren't going anywhere. You know, it's like you can have the Odyssey. Even in a dream, you can have the whole fucking Odyssey. I mean, you can just like go everywhere and do everything, and you haven't gone anywhere because it's just a dream, and it's just, you know, you never depart from the dreaming.
Yeah.
But it can look like that.
And such is the nature of what we call waking life.
Well, experience itself is that, you know, waking, dreaming, sleep, life, death, who knows, whatever. You know, there's just this very peculiar condition that seems to look like all this.
Yeah.
That is also astoundingly weird, and it is not, that weirdness is not actually concealed or hidden, and is directly discoverable and self-verifyingly experienceable.
Yeah.
And even if you don't directly discover it and self-verifyingly experience, it still is that.
Right.
So you haven't lost it by not checking it out, and you haven't gained anything by checking it out.
Well, that's a good segue into this other question. Let's say I've dedicated as many years as I've dedicated to the fine pursuit of you know, realization, and it's a fail. It's just not gonna happen. I've put it down. I've put my cup down.
I think we call it realization schmealization.
Yeah, all the devotional pictures are coming off the wall, and I gave all the yoga books away.
Yeah.
There's just no shred of it left.
Yeah, take a point.
So,
Point.
yeah.
You get your payoff, you know, bang for your buck.
So, what's second best?
Point. Oh.
Is there a right kind of porn?
Second best is anything, because anything is actually that.
Mm-hmm.
All event is nothing other than this exploring itself. So even if it doesn't appear to be, even if you think it's you muddling through your miserable life, banging your head against this and that and aspiring to this, and what it really is this exploring itself. So again, it's all a win. There's no lose. There's no losing side.
Yeah.
It's not like do this or you'll be doing something second class. And no, everything is this. This is just settling into honesty and efficiency with acknowledging what everything has always been, acknowledging what you've always actually been doing. And there's actually absolutely no gain from that acknowledgement, and there's no loss from not acknowledging it. And yet, here we are in this room talking about this weird shit.
Yeah.
So what's up with that?
Yeah. What's up?
Yeah, some people feel inclined to do that, or their spouses drag them along, or whatever.
It's a disease.
Yeah. Well, whatever.
Yeah.
But it still is. You can still check it out on any level whatsoever, and it's at least interesting, maybe.
Yeah.
You
Sure.
know, and or really cool. You know, and the degree of coolness depends upon the degree of your interest in seeing that it is cool, because its intrinsic coolness is like bottomless. If it doesn't look very cool, you're just not looking very hard, and that's cool too.
Yeah.
You know, it's all very paradoxical and slippery. Weird shit, pretty much.
Peter, yesterday you were talking about intimacy and subtlety, and you gave a really, I've been thinking about since you talked about the example of like the baby in the womb. You went through a progression of how that is like pure intimacy, and then the baby comes, and then we create. Could you just go into that some more? if you bring it at another angle, it just seemed, I don't know, really
I'm not
tight.
sure what you mean by another angle.
And
The really interesting aspect of that is that the intimacy is never lost. Like one could suppose that the baby in the room experiences the ultimate intimacy of self with environment. One is the mother. One is literally breathing the mother's breath, and the mother's blood is essentially pumping through one's veins and so on. And then there can be a seeming loss of innocence progressively as the baby is born and then becomes brainwashed and becomes trained and is trained to erect interpretative frameworks where it is a separate body and the mother's separate and the environment's separate and success and failure are possible, pleasure and pain are possible. So you get all this progressive complexity which can seem to be a loss or a lessening of that intimacy, but it actually isn't, because the real intimacy is the intimacy of experience. And let's say the perceiving principle and the perceived are absolutely one. There's no mediation. It's not like perception is here and perceived is over there by any degree whatsoever. When you see a cloud in the sky, you're not seeing the cloud over there. You're seeing the cloud right here in your experience. Absolute intimacy. Which is not a development or a second-class kind of an intimacy that, let's suppose, the first fertilized egg has. It's exactly the continuum of the actual same intimacy, the only intimacy, which is always the case, which is the inclusiveness of the field of actuality, the continuum of it, that it does not have, it has no distance from itself.
There's never any separation.
Right.
But but even the overlays, the interpretive frameworks that.
There's no separation from them
There's no
either.
separation
They're
as well.
absolutely intimate. Yeah. Even though they try to create an illusion, a claim, an implication of separation, but that's all, a magic show, because no actual separation can occur.
Is it, again, we're all maybe metaphor or whatever, as you feel like, again, this is a word, but if you rushed your mind is this field of potentiality, of, I could say the word tree, and out of this potentiality, some archetypal tree manifests.
Sure.
It seemed it's very similar. It's like that energy, what's happening there also is kind of, it's all the same thing. So it's, again, but it seems to be like the dream example, which is so, right on, whatever. If you think of if you manifest anything out of this calm mind stream, it's the same thing. It's like just another example of just, it can just pop up.
It's apparition. And apparition is one thing that happens one way. We can think of mental apparition. I'm thinking of a bullfrog, and all of a sudden, poof, there's this bullfrog there to some degree in my mind. Or, this room is appearing, and I'm not doing the room just sitting here, it's appearing. And if I was doing it, I would have made it, more interesting perhaps, or whatever. I can say that, I can spin doctor that, but in actuality, I can't say how the room appears. I can't say how the frog appears. I can't say where the frog appears. I can say, oh, that's mental and this is sensory. It's like mental sensory. It appears in and as experience, and the apparition is mysterious in its mechanism. It's mysterious in its substance. It's mysterious in its dynamism. It's mysterious what it comes from. It's mysterious what it goes to as it disappears, and all this mystery of apparition is the ongoing miracle. It never stops. Appearance never stops. But it never actually becomes anything. You can't, even though appearance is completely obvious and self-evident, you can't actually find anything, which is very peculiar. Due to the inherent instability, the inherent unresolvability of apparitions.
So you have this instantaneous apparition, that's doing itself. And whatever experience I have is also doing.
Well, you're calling it experience, it's just you're subclassifying portion of apparition as being the different, but it's not. It's just spin doctoring the same thing as having a sub-portion. Like, this is my body and this is my hand, and my hand's a sub-portion of my body. It's like, no, this is my body, the hand that it comes with. So, no, this is my, my thoughts are a subcategory of the apparition. It's like, no, it's like, it comes with everything. The entire experiential field, bang. Now it's all here, always. And you might say, oh, no, this is thought, and this is sensory, and this is, vague, whatever, bullshit vibes, and, whatever. I mean, you can have all these labels, little imaginary post-its you can put around it. But it's also, the post-its are all in the same thing, in the same place at the same time. So how different is it really? I mean, where is this difference? It's like taking a pie and imagining how many pieces you can slice it into. Well, as many or as few as you want, but the pie's still just a pie, and it's all just sitting there. So, we imaginarily slice and dice with all our classifications and subclassifications, but nothing actually gets sliced. Bang, the whole thing's always right here, right now, inclusive. You can't actually create parts, even as you can imagine. And suppose there's all these parts and subsystems and categorizations floating around. They aren't actually, there's no actual separation. There's no actual division.
Does that lead one to believe, or would you embrace the idea that any attempt at is segmenting bodily, let's look in the world of healing and medicine and that sort of thing, that a holistic approach is generally maybe more sound than the divide and conquer approach. In other words, Ayurvedic medicine
Right.
versus.
Right, I understand.
Is there some credence?
No, not necessarily, because the slice and dice style of medicine isn't actually slice and dice. It's actually holistic, because there's always a whole. I mean, you go to a doctor and you go to a Western doctor and he gives you an MRI and says, you have a bad heart valve. I got a plastic heart valve I can put in. And they phone the factory, and the factory ships over this heart valve, and they slice you open and they jam this thing in there, and they sew you up, and they give you lots of drugs. And that's a whole. It's a continuum. It's all the continuum of the experiential field that happens in. The damaged heart appears in the experiential field. The plastic valve appears in exactly the same experiential field in exactly the same way. So even though it's not being acknowledged or thought of as being that, in terms of an interpretive framework, you're interpreting that as being mechanistic and forceful and separate, but there's no actual separation findable. There's no actual mechanism findable. It's just a flow of confluence of events in the whole of the experiential field, like everything is. And so, Ayurveda and all that may acknowledge that more, but again, it's not actually any more whole. It's just its interpretive framework is spin doctoring it as being that versus the other one. The flow of events is always a continuum. It's always inclusive. There's actually no this over here and that over there. Because over here, this here and this here is all here.
It's all interpreted.
Yeah, I mean, the different divisions and differences are interpreted or imaginary. They're artifacts of interpretive framework. And the interpretive framework, what is being interpreted? The experiential field. And the experiential field is a continuum. It's inclusive, it includes itself. It has no parts or divisions or demarcations within it. The parts and divisions and demarcations become imagined onto it or within it as interpretive framework. So you're you over there and I'm me over here. That's the interpretive framework, but this is here is the continuum of the experiential flow.
Well, it seems like any extreme is counterproductive. In other words, stick with this medicine thing. You know, if you only look at, the heart valve problem, the correction, but don't take the whole body into account, there might be some problems with that. It may not be the best approach, and same for the other. If you're doing acupuncture for heart valve problems, or some holistic thing. I didn't realize, since it's getting pretty concrete, that doesn't take into account, very specific anomalies, So it seems like they both have to have an element of wholeness, yet deviation in the specifics,
Yeah, but they do, and the degree to which there's any difference at all is all in the spin document. Western medicine versus Ayurveda or anything else is just two different schools of spin doctrine. And the thing they're talking about is exactly the same thing. And the way it works is exactly the same way. And the wholeness is included. I mean, the doctors slice you open, they jam in a plastic heart valve, and they sew you back up, and they give you a shitload of drugs. That your actual body comes along with all that. Your natural, the healing system of your life force and your biosystem comes along with all that. So all this other stuff comes along with it, even if it's not being specifically acknowledged, like the Ayurveda mind. But acknowledgement or non-acknowledgement is a spin document. It doesn't actually include anything or exclude anything in actuality.
Well, the only reason we have a framework is so we can define a preference. Or do we choose a framework based on a preference?
No, actually, I don't think so. I think preference can exist outside of framework. Preference is, you might say, a spontaneous energy event. You can walk up to a table and pick a food that you imagine you would like to eat without thinking about it. You can just do it because, just like by magnetism or by divination or by, psychic force.
Well, it's spontaneous preference.
Yeah. So, but then you can justify it in terms of an interpretive framework, or you can, spin doctor it. I mean, in other words, those two sort of modes we could say could coexist and have some relationship to each other, but it's not necessarily true that an interpretive framework enables or in fact enacts preference. I would say more often than not that it's rationalization, it's support for it, justification for it.
So, an interpretive framework supports preference.
It supports it, yeah, but by justifying. We have to go over there to the Middle East and kill us a shitload of people who live there because, blah, blah, blah. Here's a list of reasons why, and that's why we had to do it.
In reality, we just wanted to do it.
Yeah, in reality, we just wanted to make a shitload of money.
Yeah. I was like playing G.I. Joe.
These 5 people these 5 billionaires wanted to make more billions, and so that's why we're really.
They preferred it.
But the rationalization is, oh no, we have to do this for political, for
Safety.
We're all safer democracy.
that's right. Make America
Maybe it
great.
was any.
Again.
Yeah. Greater again.
America broke again.
I mean, the life force generally lives itself. Life force doesn't really need interpretive frameworks to help it. Your body knows what it wants, you might say, to put it in those terms. Or, your nature gravitates towards its own desires, its own orientations.
Well, and wouldn't you say that an interpretive framework can actually get in the way of the body's intuitive nature?
Very much
Do
so.
the right thing.
Sure, very much so. It comes up to works big time. You can. You can trip over your own rationalization.
Eugene?
Why don't we take a 5-minute break, get some tea or stretch or whatever?
water sheet up. Be done shortly.
You're about to say something, I don't know if it's still relevant.
Peter, when you talk about noticing a lot, you also give different examples of how to notice. But you also oftentimes use the word subtle. You look at subtly. Remember that correctly? And that's always been kind of hard for me. Like I've been working towards that. But could you give more pointers on how to be with this more subtly?
It's not a matter of trying to be with it more subtly, it's just a matter of noticing how subtle experience and things of it is. You can approach that in terms of, in all different kinds of terms. Subtlety isn't a specific quality, it's a kind of a very vague innuendo evocation. You can notice how inconceivably detailed experience is. Like as a sensory experience, you look at something and see how incredibly fine the detail of any experiential apparition is. For example, in other words, however fine you're seeing, you can't get to the bottom of the fineness that's there. Or you can look at the subtlety of range of color. I'm using visual field here as an example, but this would apply anywhere whatsoever within the spiritual field. You can look at the astounding subtlety of range of color within. Like I could say, well, this chair is gray leather on it, gray plastic, faux leather on it. And yet, you look at that gray, how many shades are there? It's literally an infinity of shades. And so you're just letting yourself open to the richness of the actual richness of your experience beyond classifiability, beyond specifiability. You couldn't verbalize all the colors that are there. You can't verbalize the astounding range of precision of the detail of the expression. For example, and these are just two very arbitrary examples. So subtlety really refers to level of detail, and not just level of detail of the apparition, but level of detail of the act of perception itself. The seeing itself has a texture of inconceivable. Words have possibly put on that.
So cause interpretive frameworks to fall away as part of.
Well, it undercuts them. It doesn't necessarily cause them to fall away, but you undercut them. The interpretive frameworks can't really follow. They can try to keep up. It's like, okay, so I'm checking out the range of colors on that chair, and my interpretive frameworks come to the conclusion, okay, great, I see this and that and this and that, but it's going to be playing distant catch-up when you're with the actual range of colors that's there. It's like, fuck, there's no way I could list them all or enumerate them, because there's no them. It's just a continuum of moreness. And however, you never get to the end of the moreness. It's not like, okay, now I've got the last color. Finally, I've got every single shade of gray that I'm actually perceiving in that chair down. It's like, no, wait, I missed that one. So, you're literally looking at bottomlessness. And you're letting yourself notice that you're looking at bottomlessness. And then, of course, you notice that, oh my God, I'm always looking at bottomlessness. And yet, I'm able to look at bottomlessness and not notice that I'm looking at bottomlessness. That's pretty weird, too. That's subtle. And then you can look at interpretive frameworks and that's really subtle. How does that happen? How can I have this unfathomable detail, literally bottomless detail of information, and how can it's just a boring chair, but how can that happen? The whole thing is just endlessly fascinating, and it's not like the point isn't to get to some result. The point is to open the door to notice that the result you think you have is woefully inadequate. And ultimately, to notice that there is no result. There's no finality. There's no final chair you're ever going to find. It's not like do the noticing until you get to the end. Noticing is just throwing the door open. You throw the door open and then there's the horizon, and you're not going to ever get to the horizon. But you notice that, oh my God, here I thought I was in this closed door, but the door is actually open, and it's all, there's just this fathomless, bottomless environment that's revealed.
So by going through, I mean, it could be the chair, it could be
Anything.
everything just opens up.
Yeah, because by its very nature, it is that, and you're letting yourself notice that that's the case. By any degree, it's all tricks, because it's a matter of stumbling on what works for you experientially. It's not like there's some formula where, oh, you have to do it this way or do it that way, or pay attention to this aspect. It's not like that at all. It's just these are just sort of tricks and suggestions that aren't even true in themselves, but it might prime the pump of enabling you to sort of just make that leap or make that discovery.
Follow the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
What you were just describing and touching on is it sounds to me like it's an external focused view. And there was something that I had been listening to recently, and it was an invitation to take a look at sort of what is it that this is happening in?
Mm-hmm.
Like, look externally, and then where is that external actually happening? More in, I guess internal would be a way to put it, but it seems woefully inadequate.
Sure.
I don't know.
But
Yeah.
but again, you look for localization. It's like, okay, here's my field of vision appearing. I assume you might have one too if you actually exist, which I can't know. But if you do exist, you may have a field of vision appearing too here, which means there's this big sort of fuzzy edge ovoid of light that's just floating here. Okay?
Mhm.
So what's it floating in? Where is this? Here's this ovoid of light. It's very concrete, specific. It's very obvious, blatant. You can't stop it if I want to. Where is it? What's it in? What's it sitting on? In? What space is it in? What's that space made of? What is there outside of that oval? And these are not as an abstraction.
Yeah, take a look.
But yeah, look experientially, and not conceptually, but just, literally let your attention, this is the way you would look sensorially to gather information non-conceptually with your eyes, let's say. Go to the edge of the visual field and continue to have your attention there, and let's let your attention go a little further beyond the edge. What's there? That kind of thing. And then you discover that notions of localization and all that are woefully silly. Inside and outside, like what would that even mean?
It's a strange one.
It's a very strange one. That's really the point. If there was anything to discover, the discovery is how weird this is. And it's not like you get an end to weirdness. That's why it's more like throwing open the door. If you have any sense whatsoever that anything in your experience is not weird, look again. Because, you will discover it is unfathomably weird, and there's no end to the weirdness. So you open the door to weirdness, and then you're in free fall, bottomless weirdness, just ever more. And then the fact that it can seem not weird is really weird. How does that happen?
It really stopped me in my tracks that, what is this? That's, I don't know, it was a pointing thing, and it really was like, wait a minute.
Sure. But again, the point is not to get an answer.
Yeah.
The point is to open the door to the exploration, not as an abstraction,
Yeah.
but as what is the actual experiential presence that I'm calling that, or that I'm pointing at as that, whatever that particular that you're pointing at.
The sense I have is that it's usually just completely lacquered over by thought and assumption and, what'd you say yesterday, sloppy approximation?
Sure.
Like it's sloppy averaging, yeah, it's usually quite lacquered over. But it's like you settle in, you get kind of quiet, and you sort of ponder this, which isn't, it's not something you can easily turn into an object, because the invitation is experiential.
Yeah, it's not. It's, you know, you can try and objectify it, but that's just going into more lacquering over.
Yeah.
But and it's very useful and powerful to notice that even the lacquering over, nothing's been lacquered over. The lacquering over pretends to lacquer over, but it's happening over here, and as you feel the vision, and it ain't no lacquer on it. You know, you can't actually block it or change it, even if you think you're making it dull. It actually doesn't get any duller than it, you know.
The reality is here no matter what you're
Yes.
assuming.
So that's, I mean, that's the it's convenient. It's the very fortunate thing about these interpretive frameworks is you don't actually have to stop them or even free yourself from them. Just notice that they're small events and they don't actually get in the way of anything else. So you don't need to stop. I mean, you can sit here being a complete dull maniac, obsessive, you know, focuser. And while that's going on, what's over here? You know, where is it? And you say, oh, I'm thinking a mile away, describing it and narrating it and poo-pooing it and whatever. Okay, cool, but it doesn't go away when you do that. The actuality doesn't go away. And it's the actuality that reveals its weirdness. It reveals its transcendental nature.
That's really good news, because the dull maniac mode is just, that's what leaves me at least really not satisfied.
Well, yeah, we're all familiar with that. I mean, that's the essential spiritual conundrum, you know, the frustration of the hell of normalcy,
Yeah.
you know, is, you know, motivates, you know, is formally held to motivate the spiritual quest, you know. It's like, boy, life sucks, you know, my living through the dull horror of my pathetic existence, you know, what could be worse? It's like, oh my God, there might be something more. Please, you know.
So in reality, we never know where we are, we never know who we're with, we never know like what time it is. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
having.
Yes. Yes.
All be here now.
And you don't need to not be able to say, yeah, we're in the basement of a church in Doylestown, because that still doesn't actually answer any of those questions.
Yeah.
It just pretends to. So it's not like you have to become dysfunctional on human terms and stop being able to play the game and be able to bullshit with other people and all that. Because that doesn't actually get in the way of the fundamental, you know, WTF-ness.
You really, even not on that level, you really don't know who anyone else is.
No.
You're always only just scratching the surface.
And you don't know what you are, who you are.
Yeah.
You know, you don't know what anything is.
That's true.
I mean, it's all pregnant with infinite barrage of information and innuendo and possibility and flavors, but none of it actually coalesces or resolves to finality. So you can't say, oh yes, now I know exactly what it is. I mean, it's very pungent with richness, but the richness doesn't cohere into coherence. It's just a field of like information and flavor, but you never get to the bottom of it. So you can't tell what it really is.
I see reality is just kind of like a molecular field that appears to take form. Just moving, gyrating, energy, vibrational.
Yes.
You know, as you get good with this, so there's like this, the presence, just the experience as it is. I guess what I'm going is a interpretive framework. Interpretive framework is radiance as well. But do you begin to realize more that like interpretive framework is completely fungible, whatever. It's a made up belief system or a full philosophical system, or does it matter? And it's like,
Right, the interpretive frameworks recede in relevance. You know, they don't cease to be present and have their dynamism, but they're not, there's no knee-jerk reaction of that they're actually mean anything. They're kind of the mind doing its spin doctoring, arguing over here. And overall, the interpretive frameworks seem to be very, very small. They're small events, they're small subsystems in a vast system. And they don't get in the way of anything else. They exist, they coexist with all the other apparent aspects of the system, but they don't actually block anything, so there's no harm, no foul. It just doesn't matter. They're kind of a non-event that argues strongly for its relevance internally. You know, it's like the clock on your computer, you know. It's really analogous to that, you know, like on my computer screen, you know, there's all the apps and there's a desktop, and up in the corner of the little screen, there's just one little window that says, you know, 8:46, you know. And it, from its point of view, it's really important. It really wants you to know that it's 8:46 and it's not 8:47 and it's not 8:45. But that's there, and there's all the rest of the screen. And you can ignore the clock, and you can pay attention to, you know, your Facebook or whatever you're being sucked into in the black hole of the internet. And the clock's still there, and it's still really insisting that it's 8:46, but it's like, from its point of view, that's really urgent news. That's like what it's all about. It's 8:46, oh my God. You know, but it's not particularly important that from its perspective, that is what's urgent. And these interpretive frameworks are really analogous. This is a small subsystem going on in that vast system. And the important thing to notice in noticing is how small relatively that subsystem is.
would it be incorrect to say, when, say, for example, when you meet another entity, whatever, human being, whatever, I want
Like in the present circumstances.
Otherwise, you know, everything's radiance.
Yeah.
And that's what they are, you know. But when you're meeting like a new personality,
Sure.
It's those, basically you're meeting the radiance, but also all the loops and the frames of reference and belief systems
Of course,
that are
because
resident within that.
of course, because that's radiance too. It's not like those subsystems aren't actually sub and they aren't actually systems. They're just harmonics of the whole thing. It's like a fractal pattern where the details are harmonics of the pattern and are included in the pattern and implicit in the pattern, but don't subsume the whole pattern. They coexist within it. But yeah, it's always full inclusive contact. So anytime you experience anything whatsoever, you experience the full Monty. You get bang, you get all the stuff that's there. And you may not be attending to portions of it, and you may not be categorizing portions of it, so you may not even acknowledge it, but in fact, it's all there. And the less you do attend to categorizing, the more open you are to the fullness and the richness that's there. Even if you can't or don't bother to categorize it as, oh, I see this, and I see that, and I see this, and I see that, and I see this.
And so interpretive frameworks are radiance as well. We can pull an interpretive framework. If I want to need to drive home tonight, whatever, I need to pull an interpretive framework of how to drive my car and, you know, get from here to there.
Although, yeah, but yes and no, because you don't actually drive by interpretive frameworks. The interpretive frameworks may claim you are, but you aren't. If you find people that drive by their interpretive frameworks, get off the road when they come on by, because they're going to be a crappy driver.
Or like that neurotic driver in front of you that keeps stepping on the brakes.
Let me see, what do I do now? What do I do now?
Now run. Going
Oh, I should put on the brake.
It's amusing, sit back, let the car drive.
Real high.
And I mean, it's an interesting aspect of interpretive frameworks is that they're very grandiose. Interpretive frameworks claim to be doing all kinds of things. They claim to be very functional, but in actual fact, they do nothing. They're just spin doctoring off. They're like a Greek chorus off to the side. They're just just announcing things. It narrates. It doesn't actually function. Well, functioning happens by direct energy engagement. You know, when you get out of the chair and stand up, you don't think how to do it. You don't need to get out your operating manual. Let's see, how do I get out of the chair? You know, it's just, how did I do that? I couldn't possibly tell you how I did that. You know, and when I drive, how do I do that? You know, how do I not hit the car in front of me, assuming that's what happens? You know, how does all that happen? You know, it's a flow that the energy knows how to dance with somehow. You know, I mean, whatever. I mean, that's an absurd poeticization of it. Whatever it is, it's a direct engagement. But the interpretive frameworks are, no, you know, you drive because you know how to, and you can say how to, and if you couldn't say how to, you wouldn't be able to do it. But interpretive frameworks are very grandiose. They want to take credit for everything, when in actual fact they do basically fuck all. So to speak.
So when the mind gets in this search for meaning mode, it's really kind of like an endless loop.
Yeah, it's just playing. It's just an internal game. The mind's playing with itself.
You know, a trick that worked for me is to see that interpretive framework is just arising along with the appearance of the rug and my foot. And so it has no greater importance than the color of the rug or my foot. And so it disappears very quickly, you know, and
So that mode of
the
operation.
side effect of that is that I'll forget what I was talking about, because it just sort of goes and, oh, look at that.
But you're also
What was that?
65.
Plus
Or it's, you know, senility.
Or it's a drug.
Which is
yeah,
good too.
plus the gateway drugs.
Anyway, that's a bad analogy maybe, but it is what it's like
Well, it does, like interpretive frameworks,
for me.
in some way, seem to create like an analysis paralysis kind. They seem that they can, even though maybe that's not really. But if you're overly thinking about how to get out of the chair, and you think that that's actually how you do it, it all of a sudden feels very complex.
Yeah, you
Something
gotta
that
do
is
it
very
in your own
simple
way. Yeah, totally.
seems overly
Yeah.
overwhelming and just too, you know, you don't know how to get out of the chair.
Yeah, exactly. And not just something simple, like a simple, absurd example like that, but like living your life. Like, what am I doing with my life? Oh my God, I've got to get it together. It's like,
Yeah, overly
just like,
complex.
just
and
like,
overly,
shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
You know,
Chill out.
when you're hungry, find some food. You know,
Yeah.
when you want to hang
Find
out
the
with someone,
bathroom.
find someone who can stand to be with. You know, it's like, it's really,
Do
it's really, you don't have to
not
overthink it.
masturbate when you get to leave.
Yeah, it doesn't really add to the functioning to be overthinking it.
It seems to almost be the opposite, but that would be more of a cause, you know, you can't really. It seems less efficient in some manner.
Very much so.
Yeah.
It's very much, you know, one thing that, you know, people who are more successful at settling into their just a spontaneous energy way of functioning rather than being, you know, really emphasizing the interpretations, my observation, become much more efficient in their functionality. You know, just you know, just like
Not as being like a good person, but
No,
an
I just mean-
efficiency of
Yeah.
like an energetic kind of.
how smoothly they do what they do. Because you don't, you know, you want to do something, you do it. It's not like you have to think about it and wrap your gear up for it. You know, so you want to
Which
do
can
something,
also
just do
kind
it.
of feel really exhausting because if you feel like you're doing it and you have to really pay attention,
Yeah.
and you're like, you know, it's
Oh yeah.
stressful and tired, and this
All that.
never leaves you alone, so you can't get, you know, you're just like, oh.
Yeah, you're hypnotizing yourself that it's a big production. When it's sitting, it's like you want to do something, just do it. It's like, what's the fuss, you know? No, for sure.
Which can kind of, it like gets rid of a lot of, not that they actually go away, but these kind of like, you think when you're resting, and when you're doing something active, it's active, but it's kind of not, the energy doesn't necessarily have to be more spent like more, because you're doing something more active or something. It doesn't have to be, you know, more, Trying to say it all. Never mind.
As the famous Zen master said, when I'm hungry, I eat. When I'm tired, I sleep.
Yeah, it's very simple, really.
Duh. When I'm hungry, I go read a book about eating. Really?
Is your sitting there chatting with us and answering questions any more valuable than just sitting?
What, for me? Or what?
For anybody.
I don't know. What valuable than what?
What is valuable to you?
Yeah, what's valuable then? Yeah. I know why I'm here. Why are you here? I'm here because I'm a maniac.
That sounds about.
Yeah, I can vouch for that.
I'm perverse enough to think this is fun.
Apparently so do we.
Yeah.
Go figure.
Does resonance have, or transmission, or how, is there some link between resonance and transmission? How, to help someone to notice or to see the radiance or recognize?
Yes. Resonance and transmission are all synonyms basically for noticing, which is essentially, as we've been talking about, which is essentially tuning more into the richness of direct experience. And because of the essentially suggestive nature of mind and communication, when you're with someone talking about, or with someone who is enacting that kind of a more direct, rich, experiential engagement, the mind tends to try to do that. Whether it does it or just sort of creates a fiction of it, but nonetheless, that it becomes a sort of a vector that becomes internally present just as a result of suggestibility. So sure, there's something there. And then the question of how much or how effective or how useful that is left up to the individual to, sort out for themselves. But if there seems to be something and you're interested, then you can take advantage of it. It's like a surfer. If there seems to be a wave going by and you want to catch it. What the hell?
They took bees recently and taught them like a trick or something, and then they introduced like a new bee, and like a lot of the bees learned from the other bee how to get food, from, it's like a transmission, they didn't,
Sure.
They just were watching that and they're like, okay, you pull a string and then you get, do whatever.
Sure. Well, experience is intrinsically intelligent. We think of intelligence as requiring all this sophisticated hardware and central nervous systems and all that. Amoebas. You know what an amoeba
Yeah.
is? Amoebas are these inconceivably tiny little blobs of jelly.
No
They
real
can
form.
kind of morph themselves. They can find food. They can eat. They can reproduce. They can respond to environmental conditions. They don't have a brain. They don't have a nerve. They don't have anything. I mean, there's this one tiny little blob. I mean, it's ridiculous how strict down these things are.
It sounds very restful.
So the notion that intelligence requires all of this, we have to. How can we know anything if we don't talk about it? You know.
Well, that's a framework, like, because there are astrophysicists that look at the plasma and that looks like living cells. Like it moves and does weird stuff and
Sure.
ionized gas. I don't know.
Maybe the sun's a big amoeba.
Well, yeah.
Maybe it's a really little amoeba, but we're so close to it, it looks huge. And maybe we're really, really little.
Wow. Don't get him started.
It's spitting plasma balls at us, apparently. Yeah.
Just hope it doesn't get hungry. That third one looks juicy.
It's just eating us in slow motion.
I might have something. Like, I seem to have a perspective,
Mhm.
and then it's mine. And I'm wondering, do you also have that? And do you just hang out less in the this is mine?
No, not less. I mean, mindness permeates everything. I mean, everything of mine is mine. And this is my perspective, this is my point of view, this is my thought, this is, So mindness permeates everything. And, depending upon exactly what you're referring to, I certainly have my own perspective, my own, take on things or whatever, and on various different levels and with various degrees of dynamism. It's easy to get the idea, and because of a lot of spiritual teachings and spiritual boilerplate, that selfness or mindness is somehow a problem or wrong or partial or tiny. But I don't see that at all. I see mindness is actually thisness. This is me. This is my experience. This is my view. This is my perspective. This is my intelligence. This is, there's no problem with that at all. The problem would only try to define or partialize this mindness as being this my body or my history or just something. It's just it's a sort of a permeative fact that this exists, and this that exists is what I mean by me. And so therefore everything within this that exists is mine. Is that kind of what you're talking about? I don't know.
God knows, I don't know. I don't know. I'm
I
not
know.
sure.
No,
I'll listen to
sure.
it 3 weeks from now. And see.
Catch it on rerun. I should have said.
I don't know. It just seems like there's a voice here and there's a voice there sometimes. And is there the idea of an awakened person?
There's an idea sometimes, but it's pretty much bullshit. I mean, there's, awakened really just means I am pretty richly aware of kind of, everything that's present. I don't necessarily pay attention to it all the time. I mean, my attention is partialized like anyone's, I suppose. If I'm thinking about something, I'm paying attention to that. If I'm trying to get a splinter out of my thumb, I'm paying attention to that, just like anyone does. But there's a sort of for me, there's just a feeling of this is here, and this is me. I am here. And if care to attend to it and look at it and really sort of pay attention to it, like I kind of fall into, like when I'm doing these talks, then I take more of a specific inventory of this is here, and it's a pretty broad range of thisness. But I don't necessarily attend to it all the time. You know, in other words, I'm not always there. You know, a lot of the time I'm just, you know, going around doing whatever I'm doing and thinking about whatever I'm thinking and so on and so forth. Fighting with my wife, you know. That takes a lot
But
of
there's a
time.
seed of awareness for you.
A seed
There's
of
like
awareness.
there's a point of awareness that is sort of roving within this, or do you hang out in this
I
point of
wouldn't say,
awareness?
I wouldn't say a point. I would say more like a kind of a spotlight.
And are you in that, are you, is that what you're aware of all the time, the spotlight that's sort of just,
I'm aware of the spotlight, but I'm aware of what's around the spotlight too. In other words, it's like right now I'm focusing on you, so you're kind of like front and center,
right.
but everything else is also that I'm not focusing on is here too. And I
But you're
feel
always
that.
focusing?
But I'm
There's
not
always
focusing
something
on it.
that's, you're always, there's always something being focused upon within
much.
this.
Pretty much. It seems to be the nature of consciousness that it tends to organize itself as a focus.
So it is
Spontaneously.
infinitely generating different focuses that are claiming to be individual and, you know, various points of focus, like.
Well, I don't know about different. You know, I only really experience one focus.
Peter, it could be said that
If there's any other focuses, they're their own problem. In other words, I'm only aware of my experience, so that's the only thing I know is actual. You all may be actual and you may have your own experience, but I can't know that. I may be dreaming. You know, like when I dreamed last night, I was talking to somebody in the dream or whatever, and I wake up and I know I wasn't talking to anyone. There was no one there. And I go to sleep, you all disappear. Maybe this is a dream. I don't know. You know, but it could be. You know, it's a viable theory that you actually exist. You know.
And you can never know.
How can I
And you
know?
are just done and sort of satisfied with that, like that
Well,
realization of this is never going to be known. I'm never going to know.
Well, I don't know if what's to not be satisfied with. I mean, if I was dissatisfied, you know, sort of tough luck. I mean, if I could see through your experience, then your experience would be my experience. I mean, if I could see through your eyes, then your eyes would be my eyes, and it still wouldn't be a you. I would just have expanded a little.
But Peter, it could be said that, at least how I experience it, is that there's a constant, always present knowing that even dissatisfaction is just what you're calling focus. And it's momentary, it's always transient. The minute something else becomes the focus, that's disappears, it's gone forever.
Of course.
And so there is an aspect of even dissatisfaction isn't dissatisfying because it's just another color, another flavor.
Sure, absolutely.
And so that underlying knowing is always present. It's just that it doesn't need being attended to because where is it going to go?
Sure, exactly.
So it's just apparent life just keeps going, and whatever flavor it seems to show up in, and it doesn't matter or not matter either, right? Okay, good. 5, dude.
Yeah, going back to.
You nailed it.
Wow, you just
You're
say
bad, girl. You're bad.
you just were going on and on.
You're the man.
Honey, simplify
Oh,
this
no.
shit.
You're not, I'm the man.
Okay, wait, that's right. I'm the bodacious baby.
Going back to what I brought up about mindness and all that stuff. So you would probably not be inclined to say a false sense of authorship, for example. You just say a sense of authorship. In other words, why add false to it? Because there it is. You know what I mean?
Sure. And qualifying it as a sense of authorship makes it false already, because any qualification is a partialization of something that is bound to be intrinsically beyond that.
What the sense of authorship is just a Yeah. A hypothetical
What?
framework. I mean,
As soon as you qualify it as actually being authorship, then you're partializing it.
you're playing God.
Yeah, which is fine, but whatever you're partializing is going to be more than your categorization of it. It's not that it's not true that it's authorship, but it's going to be more than that somehow. In other words, what does authorship mean? And all of a sudden you're posing a question you can't actually answer. I'm sorry, I was getting into kind of a technicality with you, but yeah.
No, that's okay. I mean, it's all kind of technicality in a sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, who is it that's the big thing, the false sense of authorship. And I can understand where that's going. But it almost seems like it's so universal, it's like, why even add the word false? And then I guess what you're saying is, why add sense of authorship?
Yeah, kind of. And there's no harm, no foul. You can by all means call it that.
Yeah.
But you can also, even as you're calling it that, you can be aware that there's more there.
I mean, and it's all so transient anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all floating and changing
Yeah.
and evolving and.
Endless weirdness. Yeah. And that's what makes it beyond. Because even though the authorship is endless weirdness, so it may be authorship, but
But that's not all it is.
yeah, you dive into it and you're never going to hit bottom. So where's the authorship at?
Anyway, what's wrong with that?
Well, it's peculiar, it's like the waves in the ocean. The waves are present as waves, but the waves are really the ocean. You dive into any wave, you end up in the ocean. So it's not like the waves are the opposite of the ocean or the waves are different than the ocean. And all of these partializations and qualifications and interpretations and interpretive frameworks, some ways of spin doctoring things, are just like waves. They're not true in the sense that they're not comprehensive or accurate, but they are real in the sense that they are themselves manifestations of actuality. And you dive into any one of them, you're in the ocean. So this is what, I in the past I've called this kind of more and other. If you look at anything, it is what it is, but it's also more than that, and it's also other than that, while being what it is. So it's not like, I'm calling this a chair, it's not a chair. There's no chair. Netty. It's not like that. It's like, yeah, there's a chair, but the chair is more than a chair, and the chair is other than a chair. So that is a chair is not a problem, but the chair is an entry point into infinity, or is a wave within infinity, and the whole infinity comes with. So in other words, there's no dichotomy between these interpretive frameworks and these designations and limitlessness. The qualifications and interpretations are points of contact with the infinity, with the openness and the more and other. So again, it's not like, oh, now I'm interpreting again, I'm naughty me, I'm being bad, I'm being small, I'm being weak, No, the interpretations are all cool and it's all good, but the storyline that the interpretations spin is just the surface of an infinitely deep ocean.
It's too conclusive.
Yeah. Exactly. They pretend to be complete, they pretend to be conclusive, and it ain't. But it's fine as far as it goes. We are in a room having a conversation in Doylestown. It's fine as far as it goes. It's not like, no, that's not true. It's like, yeah, okay, sure, that's true. But is that the whole truth? The truth and the whole truth, nothing but the truth? Is that the whole truth?
Yeah,
No.
so
you can dive into the conversation in a room in Doylestown, and you're lost in infinity without having left the conversation in the room in Doylestown.
How did you ever get on the witness stand if they say, would you promise to say the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? You'd probably be arguing with them for the rest of the time.
And don't forget the so help you God.
Yeah, geez,
No.
Well, yeah.
No.
Say, well,
You're forgetting a
I
cardinal.
came here.
You're forgetting a cardinal factor. The guys that are asking that are the ones with the guns.
Yeah.
So you say, yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's
Don't-
the fault.
Number one rule, don't piss off the guys with the guns.
In other words, I'm unspiritual.
Now, if you're in an open carry state and you have a gun too, whole other kettle of fish.
Yeah.
It's like high noon.
Oh, me, so I hope you got it.
Let's take it outside, hombre.
So awake Peter, is it just this knowingness that this is the way it really is? Seeing reality as it is. No.
It's very simple. And it's actually very easy because, in fact, everyone already is seeing it the way it is. And they even know they are. There's just this weird, perverse, paradoxical mechanism of not letting themselves know that they know. So it's all very slippery. But because of that fact, it's very easy to kind of slip through the cracks into the pre-existing knowing, which is all noticing is a mechanism of slipping through the cracks at best. And that's what all the fuss is about.
You know, I think of the term gestalt, and this is almost like a no gestalt zone, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
totally.
it's an anti-conclusion zone. It's
Yeah.
like, don't close the door on anything.
Yeah, I mean, the takeaway is conclusion is impossible if you're honest. You know, if you're fact based. So if you're experiential based, if you're evidence based, conclusion is impossible. For sure. And provisional conclusions are fine, like we were talking about. You can make a draw a conclusion, and that conclusion is fine and accurate as far as it goes.
Yeah.
But again, it's not the whole story. There's more there that conclusion is itself, a wave to dive into, and you end up in an ocean, which is more than that.
Yeah.
So the relationship between this partialization and generalization that we use to analyze things and the unfathomable wholeness is an inclusive one. That's not a dichotomy there at all. Well, now we're getting down to a practical matter.
I wonder what that.
We're gonna read a book on what to
Well,
eat.
it's 1:00. We could either break for lunch and come back for a short afternoon session, or we could go a little longer if you'd like, and then break for the day. Or we could break for the day now and say, screw this shit. I'm dizzy.
Go to the bar.
I'm dizzy. The bars are open. What are we doing here? So anyway, I'll put it out there for a vote or a brawl or whatever happens.
I like lunch and.
I'm okay either way.
Okay, one vote for lunch and come back.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm for continue on. For
Yeah,
a little bit
continue on and go
longer
to the
then
bar.
call it a day.
So two continue. So one go to the bar, two continue ons. So you guys stay here and continue on. We're going to lunch. We'll be back in a minute.
Go back.
Okay, so it's
Whatever
lunchtime.
you feeling. Lunchtime.
And how long would that be?
Well, let's see. It is basically 1:00 now. Why don't we come back here like 2:15-ish?
2:15.
Is that enough time?
Yeah, let's make it
Yeah.
a quick one.
Yeah, just a quick one. And then we'll have a short afternoon. We'll have a short afternoon. It's been a long weekend and we've all,
Yeah.
we're all busy and we've been up and down and in
Yeah,
and
I hope so. I
through
don't
the
know, I
mill.
haven't tried one.
Jules is pretty
Still waiting
testy.
for that to happen.
I know.